Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to another special episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami and joining me today, and quite frankly what I hope is still my friend after this horrific experience, is Adam. Adam, welcome back to the second episode of Sonic Month.
Hello. Good to be back. It certainly was a more rocky week of preparation this time round than last week, but still, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to get into the discussion.
Well, it's good to have you back, and I am glad that you didn't run away after the amount of preparation that you put into this episode.
I would be damned if I'm not going to talk about some of these games that I've played. I'll not stand for not being able to relay my thoughts.
So what you're saying is this, experience didn't turn you into a Sonic 06 fan?
This was my personal Vietnam, I think.
Well, God, we're not even 1 minute in and already...
Flashbacks are starting.
Yeah, excuse me guys,
No, you weren't there. You weren't there in Crisis City, man.
Oh, don't even. We don't talk about Crisis City on here. You want to get me, struck for a content warning, bringing up Crisis City. Oh.
All I can say is better watch out for that tornado. It's got a car.
It's got several cars, apparently.
That's a good point.
So, of course, by that introduction, you can tell we are, of course, talking about, well, not just Sonic 06, of course. We are talking about a really subjective range of games. Last week, we talked about the retro age of Sonic and how it grew to fame with its debut in 1991 on the Sega Mega Drive. It had 4 critically acclaimed titles, Sonic 1 through 3, and Knuckles, of course, and it had Sonic CD as well. And then, Adam, what happened?
The Game Gear happened. No, we had a slightly awkward phase in the late 90s where they tried to experiment a bit with 3D and also a little bit with some of the extended universe, and didn't work out the best, I think to say.
Well, yes, of course. We had Sonic Extreme, which was cancelled. We had Sonic 3D Blast, which I still can't believe you played that.
I know. That's how dedicated I am to the cause. I'm going to put myself through everything.
Look, Adam, I don't know how to break this to you, but you're not going to win a Nobel Peace Prize with this podcast.
Just you wait. The amount of suffering I've gone through. I'll get something. A Nobel Prize, a Pulitzer, something, an Academy Award. I'll take anything.
So, who's going to play you in the film then?
Myself. I'm the only one who can do it justice.
Now I'm just imagining you in a sandwich suit, just
twirling my lettucey mustache.
Oh, of course. I keep forgetting you have a lettucey mustache. Not in real life. I just want to point that out to our listeners.
No, you don't know. Listeners don't know. I have a gloriously lettucey mustache.
Yes, yeah.
Crisp.
Crisp, crunchy, and probably washed before being packaged. But yeah, it's safe to say that Sonic's transition into 3D was a bit turbulent, I want to say. As we said, the very first proper game that we were going to have, other than, of course, 3D Blast, was Sonic Extreme, which, of course, never saw the light of day. And then we had things like Sonic R, Sonic Fighters, featuring your boy Fang, the sniper.
Pour some out for Fang.
Yeah. I actually saw a plush of him online today.
What?
Yep, there's a plush.
Where is it and how do I get it?
I'll be adding it to my list for your birthday. I'll be like, happy birthday! And your partner will be like, yeah, never let Satsu near our home again.
I don't care. I'm like, you're going to have to deal with Fang. He's a part of our lives now.
It's who I am.
It's my boy Fang.
Look how they massacred my boy. So after that turbulent period, it's safe to say that Sonic was in good standing with the fan base. It wasn't until 1998 that we got our first glimpse of really a proper Sonic in 3D, wasn't it? With the Sonic Adventure series.
Yeah, when they finally kind of put it together and were able to make a kind of workable 3D Sonic game.
And Sonic Adventure and its sequel, Sonic Adventure 2, of course, are quite frankly held in really high esteem amongst the fan base. Did you know that even in between Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, there was Sonic Shuffle?
Oh, was it that early? I didn't actually realise.
Apparently it was in between, so I had to get one of my friends, who has of course been on the channel before. Yeah, he actually told me that it came out between Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. So that was between 1998 and 2001.
Nice.
Sonic Adventure, both games, were pretty much Sega's swan song when it came to the console wars and them being like really a prominent player in the console game, because after the Dreamcast, they just never, at least up until this point, they never really created another console after that. They hung up their hat, they put down their rings, and they just said, "I'm sorry, I've failed you." And then they just walked out into the sunset, to which then they made Sonic 06, but we will get to that. There has been debate, so this is something we were discussing before we came on the show, but this idea of Sonic having a dark age is very subjective. Some people say, oh, it started at Sonic Heroes, some say it was in 2005 with Shadow the Hedgehog. It's all over the place, and it's quite hard to kind of gauge when it started. What we're going to be doing in this episode is, at the end of this month, we will be talking about the Sonic Adventure series. So just in case you guys were worried and thinking, oh god, how dare they say that Sonic Adventure's part of the Dark Age, we're not saying that. I love Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, and I know you've been playing through them recently.
I have. I've completed Adventure 1, and I'm soon to start Adventure 2, which I'm very excited to start.
I really can't wait for you to play it. I'm very, very excited.
I need to get a City Escape. That's what I've been so excited for. I feel like my adventure through Sonic is building up to me playing City Escape. This is what it's leading to.
Is this your character arc?
This is exactly my character arc. I'll play City Escape, I'll get my Fang plushie, and it'll just go from there.
Is this you admitting that you are kind of falling slowly into the Sonic fandom?
I'm certainly falling into the fangdom. You might say.
Okay, I see what you did there.
I have a knack for puns.
Oh, sorry. No. Where's the stop button?
Enough of this madness.
Listen, if I encourage this, okay? If I encourage this...
You're not going to weasel me out of this, okay?
And on that note, shall we just jump into it?
I have nothing. I don't know any other names for it now. I'm out.
I thought you were just going to scream, "Bean the Dynamite!"
Sniper! I'm just going to
Sniper! Yeah, we will be right back. See, just after these messages, until we can both compose ourselves. So... don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Welcome to Satsunami, a variety podcast that talks about topics from gaming and films to streaming and general interests.
Previously on Satsunami, we discussed Game of the Decade, Deadly Premonition, the romantic thriller Birdemic, and listen to us get all sappy as we discuss our top 5 Christmas films.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast apps. As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
We are Beer and Chill Podcast.
Podcast where we review TV shows, games, movies, and whatever else takes our fancy.
So what are you waiting for? If you're a cool kid like us, you're gonna listen to the Beer and Chill Podcast. You can get it anywhere from Spotify all the way to your grandmother's radio. My name is Jan.
And I'm Craigie C.
And we are
Beer and Chill.
Listen, Adam, we really need to have a talk about this. I really think... Oh, God, we're on. And we're back. Hello. So, that was a joke for legal reasons.
It was a half joke.
It was a half joke.
You sent me a strongly worded email. I'm on the written warning now.
Yeah, I'll just have to put out a tweet and be like, does someone know how to fire someone who's not getting paid?
Google how to fire co-host.
Yes. How to fire a friend. There's so many results, oh my god. So yeah, let's jump into the dark age, quote unquote, of Sonic the Hedgehog. Out of curiosity, before you did your research for this episode, how much did you know about this period of Sonic?
Well, I was saying this a little bit to you before the episode started. This was not so much in this period, but kind of post this period, post these particular games we're going to talk about, was where I sort of became more aware of Sonic and the Sonic franchise, and it was kind of in this environment, kind of the post, I don't know what you call it, the post Dark Age, environment, that I feel like I learned a lot of what the kind of prevailing thoughts were on Sonic, which I don't think, having delved into it now, I don't think are very fair at all. It was kind of the legacy of this period that I think I knew a bit more about than actually the period itself. And I kind of knew some of these games by reputation without ever having played them or actually done any kind of really research on them at all.
After playing these games, how do you feel now?
I can see why it gets called the Dark Age sometimes, but I don't necessarily think that's completely fair. I do think that whenever you have a franchise that goes for as long as Sonic has, you're gonna have some bumps in the road, and granted, some of these are pretty big pretty big bumps that will wreck your car if you go over them, but still, I think it's become extremely mythologized, I think more than perhaps is actually due to it.
And I was actually quite surprised hearing you say that, and again, I'm not gatekeeping, but as an outsider to the Sonic fandom and not growing up with it, and we will get into it, but Sonic bashing has almost become I don't want to say an identity, but it has become a sort of, it's the memes that you get, or not memes, that's even going too far, that's an insult to memes, but it's the jokes about Mario eating mushrooms and Pokemon being all about animals fighting and 10-year-olds catching up, the bare bones jokes that come on for these games. That's what it almost feels like with Sonic. It feels like it's kind of low-hanging fruit, that because, and rightfully so, there are a good couple of games in this franchise that deserve kind of criticism and critique, but to paint every other game, because this is something you brought up with me before we started the episode, but it's people kind of retroactively started hating Sonic after this period of time. And I have seen videos where it's game journalists saying things oh, Sonic was never good, Sonic isn't that great of a franchise. And I feel as if that's a severe discredit to what Sonic had built up until this point.
I'd say it's complete nonsense. To say it was never good is either lazy or untrue, or being untruthful. I'm sorry to say, because granted, it might not be your thing. A lot of these games aren't my favorite genre. I'm not the biggest fan of platformers, 2D and 3D. But as I said last time, I really enjoyed playing some of the 2D platformers, and I enjoyed Sonic Adventure, and I enjoyed parts of these 3D ones. So it's just bizarre to me that it has become this period seems to, as you say, retroactively tarnish the whole franchise, which a franchise that was one of the most popular gaming franchises probably of all time, in the 90s. So I do find it absolutely bizarre, what the legacy of this period.
It is quite reductive to kind of say, oh, Sonic fails and it's terrible overall because of you could point to any game in this particular age. You could point to Shadow the Hedgehog for being confused and muddled. You could point to, 06 for obvious reasons. You could point to Sonic Unleashed because, well, that as well because of the split gameplay and everything. It feels as if it's a lot more complicated, because going back to what we were saying in our Retro Age episode, Sonic was an absolute titan of the gaming sphere. Sega was on top of the world, and I have to admit, I think that's partly why they failed, because they were sabotaging themselves. In a way, the American team and the Japanese team did not get along. They didn't communicate properly. There was a lot of internal strife there. And, by the time the Adventure series rolled around, Sega was literally trying to hold on to the console market. And it just was not happening. We had the Sega Saturn, which were both, established. We have never seen a Sega Saturn in real life. I've never seen one. I've got a Dreamcast, which technically it's my brother's, but don't tell him that. That was the final console that they brought out. And don't get me wrong, the Dreamcast is a console in itself. It's very revolutionary. It had internet, it had connectable, I can't remember what it was, but it was interactive memory cards, where it's like you could transfer like the chows in
Yeah.
Sonic. You could like transfer them to your like memory card and play with them, like
Oh, wow.
Tamagotchis and things. It was very ahead of its time, and it is just a shame that it didn't do as well. So there's a lot in that kind of regard. You could say it's because of the company, it's because of other things, and as we said, Sonic was very much an independent icon. But yeah, around 2001, Sonic became part of the Nintendo family, as it were, by becoming, I think Sonic Adventure 2 was the very first game that became cross-platform. So it began on the Dreamcast and then it went to the Nintendo GameCube, which almost felt like gaming sacrilege. You had this titan who was like, oh, Sonic's the anti-Mario, he's different and everything, and then all of a sudden he's on a Nintendo console. Like, that must have blown some like die-hard fans' minds at the time.
It's absolutely crazy to think about. I was too young and also too ignorant of, of gaming, the gaming kind of market and everything to realize how big a deal this was. But I'm just going to say now, I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again. Because if you look at and maybe this is me being slightly nostalgic for the Sega Nintendo rivalry, which I kind of look fondly back on, especially now when it's Xbox and PlayStation. It's just a bunch of fanboys arguing about which console has better ray tracing. This game got 83 on Metacritic and this one got 82. Like, I don't know, there's something about the Sega Nintendo console rivalry that just seems kind of just so epic, and like the fact that it was these two titans just slugging it out. But now, especially since I think both Microsoft and Sony are just too big to fail in a way, I don't think we're ever gonna likely see Master Chief appear on the PlayStation, or I don't know, Nathan Drake come on. I mean, you never know what happened with Game Pass. Game Pass might end up going to different things, but even then, that won't feel, I don't think, as like kind of revolutionary and kind of earth shaking as it must have felt when Sonic went onto a Nintendo console.
I mean, the closest we've got is like Master Chief and Fortnite.
That's true, I suppose.
I do see what you mean. Like, you wouldn't really expect Master Chief to be in the PlayStation 4, and as you said, Nathan Drake would certainly not be appearing on the Xbox. For any gaming journalists out there, please feel free to quote this, just in case 2023 rolls around and, I don't know, Microsoft have like sold all their supercomputers and Halo is now back under Bungie, Probably never going to happen, but you know what I mean. You're totally right, though. It seemed like something that was just so big. And again, we were both too young to kind of like appreciate the impact of that. But I remember the first time I got Sonic Adventure 2, and as I said in the last episode, I was out with my mum shopping and I came across this game, and I remember being so blown away because I didn't really keep up with the gaming news, because obviously the internet wasn't as big a thing, when we were younger. We had dial-up internet. For the youngins in the chat there, dial-up internet is, if you've heard of Purgatory, it's like that, but with the internet. It was very slow internet. If you lifted up the landline phone, it would cut out the internet. It was horrific. So when I saw that Sonic had like a Sonic Adventure 2, I was like, oh my gosh, because I was a child. And I was like, oh my gosh, can I get it? And my mum got it for me. And I remember being really annoyed because the night I got it, I went to play it and one of my friends came over from school. And I was like, but I want to play Sonic Adventure 2, go away. Absolutely loved it. And then I went back later and not the same day, but later on, and I ended up getting Sonic Adventure 1 for the GameCube. Loved both of them ever since. I actually never heard about Heroes. This sounds weird, because I'm a self-proclaimed Sonic fan, but I never really kept up with the news as much, because as I said, it was like a different time. It was like you had to keep up with the gaming news through like magazines and things like that. You couldn't really like hop on the internet the same way as we do nowadays. Like,
yeah, you just go on Twitter and just find what's happening.
Yeah, so I remember I was in Blockbuster and I saw Sonic Heroes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, for the youngins out there, Blockbuster it's like a physical Netflix. I'm going to leave it at that. It's like a physical Netflix, but it used to sell, or rather rent, games as well. And I remember seeing Sonic Heroes and I was like, I didn't know they made another game. So I was like, okay. So I hired it, and this is probably the first game of the series where I felt uneasy about the franchise. Maybe this speaks to me as a child. I really didn't like Sonic Heroes. See, objectively, it's okay. I didn't like the models. I thought the models were far too shiny. I thought Sonic and all the speed characters, they controlled like buttery ice, like you were running across buttery ice. I was like, no, I do not like this. I thought the story was very childish, and I get that it's like a Sonic game, so it's obviously for kids, but considering Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 had relatively serious stories, you know, you had Eggman pretty much firing a missile into the middle of Station Square. You had him threatening an 8-year-old fox boy by saying, I'll make mincemeat out of you. That's still a cool line, by the way.
It is pretty good.
But with Adventure 2, you know, you had a young girl getting shot in the face, you had, you know, like the ultimate life form, you had all these like really serious aspects of a story. So I was expecting them to carry over like the kind of same tone of these games. And then when Sonic Heroes came out, it was just like a very generic, oh, let's stop Eggman. And this was the first time I felt as if the levels were far, far too long. You know, Sonic should be, you're running from point A to point B very fast. You know, if you want to get there from point A to B, you should have the first couple of levels maybe like 2-3 minutes max. And you know, like the maximum I think a Sonic level should be is about, I mean, maybe 5 minutes, even 10 at a push. But some of these levels were so long, and they were like objective based with like Team Chaotix and things. But I'm quite curious to hear what you have to say about this particular game, because I know you haven't really played much of this game, but this was one of the games where Sonic got criticised for having too many of his friends in the game.
I mean, so I've not played any of this game, but I did do a little bit of research on it and watched footage of it and everything. I think you kind of filled me in on it first, and when you said there was like 12 playable characters, I instantly was like, my god, that is far too many. I was kind of imagining, I thought originally that each of the 12 had their own story, and I was like, oh, that sounds like a hefty amount of too much content for a Sonic game. But then when I saw it was, you know, the teams of 3 and stuff, I was like, that's actually quite an interesting concept. And I think, again, having not played it, perhaps I look at it a bit more favourably, because I look at it, I think that actually sounds like quite an interesting concept, and I like the fact that they kind of have to work together. It sounds interesting, and you've got your speed, your flight, and your power characters, and you need to use them all to defeat enemies and stuff. I'm like, that sounds kind of quite interesting. But I do understand that in the execution, it doesn't always work that well, as you say, with the kind of buttery ice like feel to playing a lot of the characters. And I know as well people saying that, especially with talking about the levels, as you're saying, is it not like for like Team Rose, it's the missions are like ridiculously short, and then but then you get to like Team Dark, and as you say, it's ridiculously long, trying to like get your way through the gauntlets of enemies and everything. So looking at it from like the outside and not having played it at all, it looks kind of cool. It looks wild, both in a good way and a bad way. I think if I played it, I'd probably have a much different opinion, and maybe I would lose a lot of the kind of fondness that I look at it with. But I don't know, just from the outside, I'm like, it just looks like something quite different, and I was like, oh, I kind of like the idea of it.
Oh, no, I'm more kidding.
It shatter my dreams.
Well, I think the problem with this game, as you brought up before, is repetition.
Fair enough.
Because, let's face it, you've got Sonic Team, who are like, you know, the base team that you play through first, usually. And, you know, their levels are kind of mid-length. But then you've got Team Dark, who, as you said, they have the longer levels. The levels are a lot harder to play. Then you've got Team Rose, who are the easy team, which seems weird to have an easy team as like choice 3. Then you've got Team Chaotix, and Team Chaotix are more like objective based. So they'll play like, you know, find the 5 crabs in Seaside Hill, or find the, oh god, I can't remember. There was one where it was like extinguish 30 or 40 torches in Mystic Mansion, and you were like, ah. Now I remember I played this in stream, okay, and I missed one. So I had to go through the whole level again.
God.
I had to go to the very end just to get this one. And I was so done with it. It was just tiring. But what makes it worse is they reintroduced special stages. So do you remember the special stages in the originals?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in this one, I think it's very similar to, I want to say the Sonic 2 ones, where you're running down like the tunnel.
Oh, yeah, that is a Sonic 2 ones, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's horrific because, at least for me anyway, I don't know if I'm playing it wrong, but every time I sped up too fast, it's like they would kind of run halfway up the tube, but then they would get caught in something and then fall down again and lose all their momentum. And you're like, well, what's the point? And that is the only way you can get Chaos Emeralds, might I point out.
Oh, really? So you have to do that? Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so you have to play through like the second act of every level through like hundreds of times just to get the Chaos Emeralds. And the easiest way to do this is by playing through Team Rose's levels because they're the shortest. They have this stupid mechanic. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a rant here. They have this stupid mechanic where you find like a cage with a key in it. So you use a power character, you bash the cage open, you get the key. Well done, champ. We're gonna complete this level. Only you look at the time and you think, there's a lot of time left in this level. And if you get hit once by an enemy, and I mean if he brushes against your ass cheek once, you lose that key. There's no way of getting it back.
Oh, that's terrible. That is a terrible. Not having not played it, I could instantly tell you that is a terrible mechanic.
And that is. Oh, it is awful. And I don't know, for me personally, and I know I don't want to like criticise the hard work of the developers here, but it just feels like such a lazy port. Like, the only reason I say that is because obviously they wanted it cross-compatible with, like, you know, they wanted it on the PlayStation 2, they wanted it on the Xbox, the GameCube, and apparently the PlayStation 2 version is terrible because apparently if you're fighting a boss, then one of the letters of his name stays on the screen. I don't know if that's for all the bosses, but it's for a couple of them, and you're like, this is ridiculous. As I said, I don't like the models. They feel very shiny and plasticine. You know, see, compared to what we had before in Sonic Adventure, it was the perfect designs. You know, Sonic in Sonic Adventure 2, he was so expressive, and you could tell the emotions the characters were going through. Same with, you know, even though Sonic Adventure had kind of janky, you know, animation, you could still tell what was going on. But for Sonic Heroes, I just didn't feel that. And that kind of leads me on to my second point. Why the hell did they use the same character models for Shadow the Hedgehog? No, Adam, I'm asking you, why?
I don't know.
Why? Why?
I don't know, man. Okay, should have been my boy Fang, but anyway.
It should have been, with his pop gun. But yeah, that was the kind of period where I did complete it, by the way, in case anyone was thinking, oh, you didn't complete it, Sass. It's like, yes, I did. I completed it, I took down Metal Overlord, and I'm still pissed at the ending because, and this is a very minor nitpick, but at the very end, you have to fight Metal Overlord with all the different teams. And then once you go through that, you get the final fight, you know, the super form fight. So for Sonic Adventure, it was you versus Perfect Chaos. For Sonic Adventure 2, it was Sonic and Shadow versus the Final Hazard. For this one, it was Sonic, Tails and Knuckles against the Metal Overlord. Can I just say, Sonic gets a super form, but the other two don't. I don't know why. Genuinely, they get like bubbles of energy, but they don't actually get their own super form, and I don't know if that's like a legal thing. I don't know if that's like
Only Sonic can go super.
Yeah, I actually thinking back on it, I think that was one of the stipulations in the comics, that only Sonic could go super, but I don't know if that means like Sonic only in that, or that applied to the comics. I think that actually has a stipulation.
Was that a Ken Bender special, was it?
I actually don't know if that was when he was causing a ruckus, well, more of a ruckus than usual. Also, can I just say I'm so proud of you for bringing in Ken Bender.
I listen, I pick things up.
I'm like, oh my god, he does listen to my rants.
Ken Bender bad.
Just put up on your wall, Ken Bender's bad. Oh, we'll get to him, don't you worry. But of course, speaking of bad fan fiction, that of course leads us on to Shadow the Hedgehog. And you did play this game, so I want to hear, Adam, I want to hear your truth. This is time for you to set the record straight.
I did play this game, Your Honor. I played the PS2 version, which from what I understand, I think the PS2 got a lot of the worst. Maybe the PlayStation franchise in general got the worst versions of a lot of these Sonic games from this era. So yeah, this was the game one of the games I was most excited to try. I really wanted to play Shadow because, again, I only knew it by legend. It was the kind of the outlier in a way from the Sonic franchise, the one that was quite different tonally and I suppose a bit mechanically. So I was very excited to try it, and all that enthusiasm very quickly drained away. It was a chore. I didn't do all the 10 different endings, but I managed to get one ending in the game, and I honestly found that a struggle. I found this one a real struggle struggle to play. I like a lot of the ideas that are there. I like the fact that, they obviously put a lot of content into this, and the fact that there are so many different endings, and, each level has usually 3 different objectives for you to complete, and you can only complete like one objective, and that'll put you onto a different path. So I like that it does give some replayability. There is a lot to the game. You're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. It's just a shame that the bang is so it's so mechanically awful. It was the mechanics of this game. I always felt like I was in combat with fighting with the controls for the camera, for controlling Shadow, for attacking. It just was a struggle, and there was a point when I was playing the last level of my thing, which is, oh my god, I forgot the name of it now. I can't remember. It takes place on the Ark, and it's basically when the Ark's like falling apart, and you have to jump from all these like floating platforms, and that was absolutely bringing my piss to a boil for all the fact that the camera kept getting caught on things, and I couldn't see where I was jumping, and I had to make some blind jumps, and then I felt like Shadow would just go spinning. I felt every time there was a 50% chance anytime I did a homing attack with Shadow that it would send him flying off the edge of the stage at point. So I just found it so frustrating to play, and the story was honestly was just all over the place for me. And I get that, I know that's a criticism of the game, that a lot of the stuff doesn't hold together until you kind of complete all the different 10 endings, and then it kind of brings it together. But I was joking to you where I had this random scene towards the end where one of the kind of main antagonists showed up who I hadn't had any contact with the whole game, and was like, I'm gonna get vengeance on you. And I was just like, dude, I have no idea. I barely know who you are. And I barely know why you want vengeance on me. I don't understand. But I did have to laugh at some of that. So again, I found it frustrating to play, and then the story didn't hook me enough to make me want to explore more of it. So yeah, this is the only Sonic game that I played so far that I can say I didn't have any fun with. Some of the early levels I thought were tolerable, but I wasn't having fun. And that I think that's maybe the real mark against Shadow. I just had no fun playing this game at all.
No, I've got nothing to say to that. I agree. Moving on, Sonic. I want to flash back a little just to kind of contextualise what Shadow kind of represented at that point in the franchise. Because, see, in all honesty, I feel as if nowadays, and trust me, you'll probably get a sense of that later on, when you play the later games, when you look into it more. But Shadow nowadays is looked on as like this very edgy, and I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously Shadow the Hedgehog, the game, does not do him any favours by having him holding a gun in front of an explosion, and you're like, yeah, I can understand that. When Shadow was introduced, and again, I'm not saying it's like Shakespearean writing or anything before I go into this rant. I'm not saying like, oh, he's one of the best and well-written characters in the whole of gaming. He's not. It's a Sonic the Hedgehog game. Come on, have a word with yourself. But at the same time, Shadow was a fan favourite from day one when Sonic Adventure 2 came out. Shadow was like the anti-Sonic, and he had this whole tragic backstory where he basically had to witness his best friend, his only friend on the Ark, which is a space colony. But Sonic fans will know. Look up the wiki, trust me. But Shadow lived on, the space station alone. He lived with his friend, Maria, and then he had to watch helplessly as Maria was ripped away from him, literally shot in the face. Or not in the face, I say that as a joke. She wasn't really, she was shot.
Could have been in the face, we don't know.
It might as well have been, because I mean, considering the art direction in both Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog for her, she looks like an alien. I'm sorry, she looks like one of the Black Arms. But I digress. I was sure that Maria wasn't supposed to be the ultimate life form here. But anyway, I digress. So Shadow was sent to Earth because of Maria. Maria's last act before she died was pushing that big old red button to get him away, and then Shadow's captured for, I think it's 50 years they say, and then he comes back again and he doesn't really have a good memory, which seems to be the only consistent thing about his character. And he thinks about casting vengeance on the whole of humanity for what they've done to him, and of course that's only kind of reinforced by his creator, Gerald Robotnik, being like this mad scientist who wants to crash the space colony into the Earth to kill everyone. Don't worry, I'll get on to that point. But, you know, it was like, eventually at the end, you see him have like a change of heart. He hears like another character say, oh, like Maria's final words as well. You know, it's coincidence, but come on, again, Sonic game. But he hears those words and he remembers Maria's last words, and that spurs him to become a hero in the end. He risks his life and he falls to the earth and everything. And in his final act, instead of like exacting vengeance and killing everyone, he's just completely saved everyone. Even though throughout the game he's just filled with all this kind of hatred and rage and just utter bitterness towards everyone he comes across, he still becomes a hero. And that kind of is reflected in, you know, the main song of Sonic Adventure 2, Live and Learn, which, have you heard that song yet?
I think I might have heard bits of it. I can't call it to mind, but I think I would probably know it if I heard it.
It's an utter banger, first of all. But it's kind of the same vein as Open Your Heart, you know, the final song in Sonic Adventure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's like a huge debate about which one is better, but come on, guys, it's Live and Learn. No, for legal reasons, that's a joke. But after that, Shadow left such an impact. And again, sorry, going back to the song point, in like the Live and Learn lyrics, you know, it's all kind of cheesy pop and everything, and it's like living and learning, as the title suggests, but it kind of reflects Shadow's like character development. And as I said, in that final act, he absolutely gets killed off. And it's almost a parallel to, do you remember E101 Gamma's story?
Yeah.
Or sorry, E102, sorry. I call myself a Sonic fan.
Yeah, I remember Gamma's, yeah.
Yeah, where he kind of sacrifices himself to, you know, free his brothers and everything, and only, obviously, like, Shadow made a bit of a bigger impact, but then I remember reading I had no idea Shadow was back for Sonic Heroes, and I remember reading the booklet, and it was like, oh, Shadow's back, and I was like, huh? It's like, oh, Andy's got amnesia, he has no idea who he is, and I'm like, and even in the game, they don't really bring it up, they're just like, I thought you were dead. Nope, neat. And that's it. They kind of just move on. It's like, oh, okay. And obviously, they brought him back because he was a popular character. But ever since then, he's been portrayed as like this very edgy, don't talk to me, Linkin Park, Nirvana, listening, edgelord. And you're like, that's not Shadow's character at all. And it's sad because it's Sega that are making those decisions. You know, I can't say like, oh, it's what the fans want. In fact, technically, it's what the fans wanted, but that's another story.
They don't know what they want, though.
Yeah, like, Sega, you shouldn't listen to children. Like,
don't listen to fans. It's just an advice, just general advice to anybody. Fans don't make the best decisions.
But yeah, long story short, they did. And they gave him his own spin-off game where he was a gun-toting, alien-killing, quote-unquote badass. And don't get me wrong, I remember at the time being very excited to play this game because I really liked the character of Shadow the Hedgehog. But when I played it, I was like, and this was the one I really struggled through. I was like, I completed it again. I got all 10 endings. Shout out to Lost Impact. I hope it dies in a fiery hell. Terrible level. You know, like, there was a lot of horrible, horrible stuff in that. And the thing that gets me the most is there are absolute nuggets of good ideas in there, but it just comes across as a fan fiction. You know, you've got Shadow, who was created by aliens. This is the worst one, but they try to retcon Gerald Robotnik as being the saviour of humanity, and I'm like, I'm sorry. No, I played through Sonic Adventure 2. It took me years to get past the Bio Lizard, okay? You know, I did not defeat the final hazard just for you to, like, gaslight me and say, oh no, Gerald Robotnik was a hero. He was trying to stop the aliens. It's like, he shoved a space station up the ass of a lizard and tried to crash it into the earth. Does that sound like a rational Nobel Prize winning man?
Maybe he was trying to save the Earth by destroying it.
Don't you start. Don't you take our side. It got me because at the very end there is a literal cutscene where it's the president of what? I don't know. The president of the Federation of Nations or United Federation? I don't know. They're never clear on what the country is. It's like not America, okay? It's not America. But the president says, oh, maybe we were wrong about Professor Gerald. Let's honour him and work towards a peaceful and prosperous future. And it's like, this is literally your government organisation, GUN or GUN or whatever you want to call yourselves, you stormed a space station, shot a child in the face, and put a hedgehog in the fucking freezer. What is your issue? Are you trying to get re-elected, Mr. President? Is that why you have a picture of Sonic and Shadow on your desk? What's your deal? Do you want to talk about the picture?
Oh, the picture was the lone bright spot in my playthrough. When it cut to, I think I only had one scene in my playthrough with the president of the United Federation of Federating stuff, and it cut to his desk, and he was talking on the phone, and then it cut to his desk, and there's a picture of Sonic and Shadow outside the not White House, but maybe the White, wherever it is, and it's just great. Sonic's there, just like, yeah, doing it, and Shadow's doing the classic with his back half turned to the camera, and I remember messaging you being like, that has made my day, seeing this photograph the president has, and then you've been like, well, let me tell you, that photo cannot have taken place, and I was like, I love it even more.
Honestly, any Sonic fans out there, please tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think there's a possible way that photo could have been taken. You know, maybe it was taken in between Heroes and Shadow, but if so, what happened? What did the president phone up Sonic and Shadow? Because there was 12 characters in that damn game. I know. I completed the damn game. Let me get this straight. So is this president pro hedgehog? Is he anti hedgehog? What about Amy? Amy's a hedgehog. Was she not invited? What's his stance on Big?
He's anti-echidnas.
Yeah, Team Pierre. Is this Ken Penders?
Oh my god, I love it. President Penders.
Did you say President Penders?
I did indeed. 2024, make it happen.
Oh, Jesus. Oh. You know what? I'm going to move on quickly to the gameplay. But yeah, long story short, as you said, there's nothing I can really add. The gameplay's slippery. The models are ugly as hell. For a game that's supposed to be a gritty, I must explore my past, that kind of thing, why would you use plasticine shiny models? I can't take it seriously. I mean, it's a hedgehog with a gun. I'm obviously not taking it seriously. But more so, if you're going to get me invested in the story, why do they look like that? Why is Shadow part alien? Why is it part alien?
Why anything? Why anything in this game, really?
And that brings me to my next thing. Well, two things before we move on to the infamy that is, you know what's coming.
It's the next one.
The fact is that, again, Gerald Robotnik made Shadow because he pledged to deal with Black Doom, blah, 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 in 50 years the comet would come back, blah, 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 blah. Now, let me ask you something. Where does the Bio-Lizard fit into all this? Because the Bio-Lizard is supposed to be the ultimate life form prototype, and it is a giant lizard, and I'm not exaggerating, I'm not making that up. Please look up Bio-Lizard. Trust me, I have cried a million tears just trying to get by that damn thing. It's Sonic Adventure 2. Did he try to make a giant lizard? And then he was like, I didn't think I should make a hedgehog, but these aliens made a damn compelling point.
They had a PowerPoint.
And there's also rumours, and I don't know if this is, because I think they brought this up in the comics, but for Maria, again, I don't know where this is confirmed, but it's implied that Maria, and this is kind of sensitive territory here, but Maria has a immunity disorder that they call NIDS instead of the other acronym that you're thinking of right now. So that was supposed to be the thing he was trying to cure. Obviously, they never bring it up in the game, because let's face it, that's not going to be something you're slapping on the front of a Shadow the Hedgehog box.
What wild territory Sonic went into in this era.
Yeah, apparently there's only 2 characters with this disease. It was Maria Robotnik and it was some freedom fighter in the comics, I think. And yeah, it just seems very, very weird. And I'll go back to the 10 endings or the 50 endings, whatever you want to say. The endings are horrific. They're all over the place. You've got one where Shadow's an android, which I hate because that's a neutral ending, and that's probably going to be the first ending you're ever going to get. And you have to fight against these low polygon Shadow clones, and it's like, no, come on, guys. Come on, have a word with yourselves. What are you doing here? And you get one where Shadow actually contemplates his existence, and it's very depressing. There's a scene where he beats Black Doom with Vector the Crocodile, of all people. Trust me, I'll get to it in a minute, Adam. Hold your horses. And he has this very emotional speech where he's like, I'm Shadow, and this is like probably as close as I can get, but he says something along the lines of, I'm Shadow the Hedgehog, a research experiment gone horribly wrong. And he kind of says, like, I shouldn't even exist and things. That implies something a lot more sinister. I don't know how you feel about that, but it implies something a lot more
Yep.
kind of sinister that
I mean, quite uncomfortable.
yeah, and for a game like Shadow the Hedgehog, it's like, wow, this could be something that, if they're gonna explore it, they shouldn't spend like 2 minutes at the end of the goddamn game like exploring. But what makes it insulting, and again, I know it's a children's game, but what makes it insulting is they had to put Vector the goddamn crocodile beside him, who sounds like this. And you're like, so sorry, go on. Oh, were you gonna say something there?
No, I was just sorry. I was just sorry. I'm just contemplating. I'm just thinking. What if you travelled back to 1992 or 1993 and told a kid who's like playing Sonic or Sonic 2, like this really colourful game about this hedgehog that frees captured animals and stuff, and you were like, here. just you wait, like over a decade, 10 years later, just you wait to see where this game series has gone. It's so funny thing. I don't want to like directly compare Sonic to Mario, because they are, for as much as they get compared, they are quite different games. I don't think it's always fair to like directly compare them, but Mario has always stayed kind of true to that original format. It's never, and we've talked about him basically being like, he's more a brand than he is really a developed character, while Sonic is much more developed character. But the Mario games have always had very simple stories that always seem to revolve around Mario rescuing Peach and stuff, and that's been the same since his debut. It's just it's so funny that Sonic went off and really that Sega really kind of dug into the quote unquote cinematic experience and really tried to have these kind of like vast stories with like serious issues, and well, it's not like serious issues, but like kind of skating next to kind of serious issues and sort of world-ending consequences. I just find it so funny the direction they went with it.
Because on the one hand, and maybe this says more about me than the games themselves, but I actually didn't mind when they tried that, because if there's one thing I do like about Sonic, it's the fact that they do go into kind of new territory with their games. It's the fact they try new things, and if one thing doesn't work, they'll say, okay, we'll do this or we'll do that. But they had Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, which were both like just such good games. Sonic Heroes, as much as I don't like it and it's got some terrible gameplay flaws, at least it was like a kind of playable game, At least people got some enjoyment out of it. But I feel as if Shadow the Hedgehog was the kind of tentative camelback breaker. It was the one that it was like, people were like, really? Shadow the Hedgehog? This formerly deeply written character that just, they were like, oh yeah, he's going to be like edgy with a gun now. It's weird to say, but somehow Sonic 06 actually got his character done better in that than Shadow the Hedgehog itself. Exactly. It's just a mess. It's a mess from start to finish. And honestly, this could be its own episode, but basically ends with him blowing up the comet and blowing up Black Doom, which, fun fact, apparently Black Doom is listed as one of the characters that should not be used in the comics. I have no idea why, but before we move on to the next game, is there any closing points you want to say to Shadow the Hedgehog?
Just disappointing on every level. this game, and it's not like I expected. It's not like I expected this to be an amazing game. I knew by reputation it wasn't a good game, but I thought I would at least find some kind of fun with it. And I just died. There was no fun to be had. It was a bleak landscape, and I was very disappointed by it.
As someone who has completed it, I can 100% agree. The fact you have to play Westopolis over and over again 10 times just to get 10 different endings is just ridiculous. I can see what they were trying to go for, but after like Sonic Heroes, it was clearly established as like an anti-hero at most.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're saying things like, is he friend or is he foe?
That is the thing as well. He's clearly friend. He's clearly a hero, as you say, anti-hero at the most.
And one thing I just want to quickly point out, just before we move on to Sonic 06, is the fact that we get all of our characterization of Shadow based on the first scene. I don't know if you've noticed this when you booted up the game, but it's like Shadow's standing on this hill and he's like, why can't I remember anything? And you get the scene of Maria getting shot and he's like, oh, gruesome image. And then all of a sudden, aliens attack, and Shadow says the most deviant art fan fiction line I've ever heard in my life, where he goes, "I don't have time for these humans," or something. You're like, what? What? Huh? And then it's like, oh yeah, he has to collect the Chaos Emeralds, and just it's dumb.
It doesn't hold together at all. Like, it really just feels like it's been duct taped together, like, and the duct tape is fraying.
It really does. And speaking of games held together by duct tape, Sonic 06. So basically, I'll keep my opinion short on Sonic 06, but if you want to hear my full opinions, we do have an episode where I talk to one of my friends, Super Shadow 271, and we went for a good 2 hours on this game. Really?
A really good episode, that one.
Oh, thank you. It was a long dissection. I have to say, it was a long one. But yeah, I'm going to turn it on you because, Adam, you know that this game is like the Superman 64 of this franchise. It is considered one of the worst video games of all time. So you went out and you actually bought a copy like the mad lad you are.
I used my own money, purchased a copy for my 360, because this is one of these games that Sega has delisted quite a few of these games from this period, so you can't play them on modern systems. So you need to get your old hardware out. And yep, so I used my own money. I purchased a copy. I waited eagerly by my letterbox for it to arrive, and it eventually did. And so, roughly the story. Again, I didn't. Sonic 06 is quite a big game, and I didn't come close to finishing it at all. But the story roughly revolves around this place called Soliana and its ruler, Princess Elise. Dr. Eggman shows up during this festival and kidnaps Elise, and he says he's going to unleash the flames of disaster. And Sonic is there to try and rescue the princess and stop Eggman from releasing whatever the flames of disaster are. And so the game is divided into kind of 3 story sections. You have Sonic's story, you've got Shadow's story, and then there was a new character for this game called Silver, and you've got his story. So I played most. I didn't play most of it, but I played mostly Sonic's story. I got about just under halfway through, and I played a little bit of Shadow and Silver's. What I'll say about this game, Sonic games, for the most part, have actually really strong openings. I tend to find, certainly the ones that I've played, that usually it's either the best level in the game is right at the beginning, or else it's very frenetic and fast and action packed, and it's good fun, and you're like zipping around and everything. Sonic 06 has certainly the worst opening of any Sonic game I've played so far. I think it might also have one of the worst openings of any game that I've played that I can think of, certainly. So there's quite an impressive CG cutscene beforehand. That's all fine, but then the game, rather than, so basically the kind of CG cutscene ends with Eggman like escaping with Elise, and you're like, all right, we're going to enter right into like a level, and Sonic's going to be chasing after it. But no, it like cuts to the next day, and Sonic is dumped into Soliana, which is a kind of open world location, and you then have to try and figure out what the hell you need to do to like progress the story, and you need to talk to some people, and you need to start by playing a side mission and getting enough money to earn these special special shoes that you then can, and then you need to earn the light dash, which is a move quite famous in the Sonic games. So eventually you'll do all that, and then you get into the first level, and so it's quite like, you're like, oh god, I just want to like play the game. And then I got into the first level, and oh my god, the mechanics came back with a vengeance here. I lost all my lives instantly in the first level. I was so frustrated. I found Sonic clipping off the edge of things. There's one section at the end of the first level which is called Wave Ocean, which is like a proper speed scene where Sonic is basically going to continuously run, and you've got to kind of direct him around obstacles. And this just absolutely messed me up. There's one bit early on where you have to run under a pier, and I could not for the life of me for ages figure out what the hell I needed to do to get him to avoid the supports of the pillar. And I just kept hitting objects. I got so frustrated, and I eventually pushed through, and I completed the level, and then went to the next stage, which was a boss fight against this thing called Egg Cerberus, which is this kind of big robot dog, which only has one head, which annoyed me because Cerberus, the mythical beast, has 3 heads, but Eggman's clearly not a student of antiquity. And so basically you need to like get to the head of this beast to try and control it and get to run into walls and things like that. It's simple enough to do, but I could not figure out how the hell you were supposed to control it. It didn't seem you had any control over the kind of robot dog when you got hold of it, and it was just again another exercise in frustration, and I was getting so angry playing it. And I think I was messaging you at the time being like, I'm not enjoying this at all. Then I got to the next level called Dusty desert, where Sonic has to escape with Elise. Again, this is where my frustration all came to a boil, and I kept dying in the level, and I remember messaging you being like, nope, I'm done with this. I hate this game. I hate it so much. I'm not playing anymore. I'm so angry. And so I went away. I didn't play it for the rest of the day. I cooled off, and I was like, right, I'm going to go back and play a bit more the next day. And so I went back to it, loaded up the Dusty Desert again. I actually managed to get through it fairly easily level, and then played some more levels, and I actually started having a bit of fun, I'm going to be honest. I'm glad I went back to it. I kind of got into it. I kind of got a bit more au fait with the controls for Sonic, and I felt like I was able to do more stuff, and I didn't find any really frustrating levels. There was a snowboarding bit early on in one which I found a bit frustrating because I found it very difficult to control. But after that, I got through and I was like, okay, no, I got to the point where I got to unlock some of the other stories. Then I got to the famed Crisis City level, where Sonic basically gets sent into the future by Eggman, into this destroyed city. And on the one hand, the level looks really cool, and I think it has some really cool sections in it. But again, I found it a very frustrating experience to play. I just scraped through it, and I thought, you know what, I'm calling it here with Sonic Story. I've unlocked Shadow and Silver, and I don't think I can play any more of this right now because I can feel my frustration coming back. So I then loaded up Shadow's Story. Shadow's Story, I think, starts technically before. You might be able to tell me if I'm wrong with this, but I think his starts technically before Sonic's, and he starts off. You play a lot of the kind of same repeated stages, but you do it in a different kind of order with different objectives. On Shadow's first level, I found him a lot easier to control, so I was having a lot of fun. Unfortunately, it ends with a vehicle section. I quickly realized why people do not like the vehicles in Sonic 06. They're very difficult to control. But, I was like, okay, this level's pretty good. And then I had to fight Egg Cerberus again. All my frustration came back. I found it even harder this time. I don't know why, but it was even more of a struggle. And I was like, oh my god. And then I got to Shadow's next level, Forest Valley, and that just broke me. I found myself just getting caught on bits of the scenery again when I was trying to speed away from things. All the kind of mechanical bugaboos came back just with a vengeance, and I was just like, nope, I can't play any more of Shadows. So I gave that up, and then I tried Silver's, and Silver's quite different to the two in that he moves a lot slower, but he has a lot of psychic. His big thing is psychic powers, which you use to basically attack enemies and also kind of do some platforming. And it was a different change of pace. I wasn't really a fan of it, but I didn't really have any problems with it in the first level. And then he's got a different boss fight, thank God, which is kind of fairly standard, big enemy, fills the screen, and you just kind of got to move, on your platform, you just kind of got to avoid his attacks. And it took a bit of time, but I was like, okay, I can kind of deal with this. And then again, I tried Silver second level, and it wasn't like I had any problems. I just got very lost in the level and didn't know what I was supposed to do. And I kind of got bored rather than I found it frustrating, so I kind of gave up. So I don't know quite what to say about 06 because its reputation really precedes it. And I can see a lot of why people have problems with it. And I get it. Mechanically, it was frustrating. You do have to repeat stages, and I don't think the story again wasn't really grabbing me in. Eggman looks horrible in this game. I don't know what they did. I don't know why they changed his model, but he just looks wrong on every level. Not a fan. I didn't really get to any of the kind of the juicy story bits that everybody talks about. I've watched some of the cutscenes and stuff, but I didn't quite get to that. But the story I was like, it's kind of similar to a lot of these other Sonic storylines, I think, from this time, in that they're trying to be quite grand and cinematic. I didn't think it was great, but I didn't really have any problems with it, but I can see why mechanically the game was frustrating. But you know what? Unlike Shadow, I had fun playing bits of Sonic, and Sonic 06, and I could see, the core. There was a good core to it that could have made a kind of good game. It just needed more polish and it needed more refinement. So yeah, again, I get why people don't like the game, but from what I didn't finish it, so maybe this would change if I finish the game, but I don't think to me, it doesn't quite deserve the kind of infamy it has. But then this is from an outsider's perspective, so I don't know whether you agree or disagree from somebody who's far more, invested and far more invested in the kind of Sonic franchise.
I'm a bit mixed, if I'm honest. To kind of put it into perspective, this was Sonic's 15th anniversary, and they released Sonic 06, and they also released, I think, a remake of Sonic 1 for, I want to say it was the Game Boy, I could be wrong, but they released that, which was critically panned because it played worse somehow than the original. And if you get your own game wrong like that, how the hell are you supposed to get Sonic 06 out? And of course, because it was the 15th anniversary, they wanted this game to come out for the anniversary, and clearly we all know it wasn't finished. And there's loads of Sonic fans that say if this game had the time to, be developed by Sonic Team, then it would have been the best game ever. It would have been perfect. I don't know how much I agree with that, because you still would have had the same story beats games. You still would have had Princess Elise and Sonic having a relationship. It would very much be gameplay differences, I think. Like, it would play a lot better, probably. It would be optimized better, but I don't think the story beats would change very much. I could be wrong. There could be a completely different vision for this game I don't know about. But let me put it into perspective for you. The fact that during the game you said that you got the light speed shoes. I was going to make a joke, like a Sonic Adventure joke there, but I won't. I won't put you through it again. But throughout the game, you can save rings and get like these gems you put in your shoes, and it gives you different abilities. Like, one can slow down time, one can make you small for some reason and make you jump infinitely. One is like a teleport. You throw like this gem, and then it teleports you to wherever the gem lands, you know. All of these like really weird power-ups, but you think, okay, they're being quite creative. But see the bar at the bottom right-hand side. So you were saying that you were playing through some levels with Elise, weren't you?
Yeah.
You know how the bar goes down when you use that power?
Yeah.
It does not go down for the gem abilities. They didn't program that in. So you can infinitely skip parts of levels because the game's broken like that. And you're like, fantastic. Absolutely stellar work, guys. Thank you so much for programming this game. And it really baffles me because Silver's has been programmed, Shadows has been programmed. I just don't get it. I really don't get it. And I feel as if this was the last game that they ever tried to do like a dramatic storyline. And I feel quite sad about that because this is the final game where, you know, people are like, oh, it's, you know, the worst game of all time, which personally I played worse, I'm going to be honest.
It's not the worst game of all time.
And again, I know I use Nickelback as an example, but it's almost like, you know, the Justin Bieber or, you know, Nickelback or whatever band you want to put in here that's overly hated, but they're not that bad. It's like, I feel as if Sonic 06, it deserves criticism. I'm not saying like it doesn't. It deserves criticism, it deserves critique, it deserves to be picked apart, but I don't think it deserves to be hated 1010% compared to like what people say, you know, on the internet. And I feel as if this is kind of the issue with Sonic as a whole, because it's like ever since Sonic 06, Sonic has this reputation now of, oh, look at Sonic 06, look at how the franchise has fallen, oh, Sonic was never good and everything. And you're completely right, there are nuggets of like a good game in there. There's like Sonic's gameplay. I honestly prefer Sonic 06 gameplay compared to something like Heroes or Shadow, and that may be a very hot take, but I don't approve of like this buttery, slippery kind of movement. I feel as if although Sonic is slow as hell in this game, he should be faster, I do agree, but I do think he controls a lot easier, obviously until he glitches through the map and there's nothing you can do about it, and the max speed sections are terrible. I will admit, the max speed sections are awful. This is of course the very first game where Sonic the Hedgehog dies, and I feel as if they could have had a serious story like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, but still kept some humour. And fun fact, did you know that Shadow the Hedgehog, I think, was the first game that they changed the voice actors in?
Oh, is it from the cartoon that they...
Yeah. Yeah, from Sonic X. So they brought a guy called Jason Griffith who, you know, I've never met the guy, he's probably a lovely guy, but I think his Shadow portrayal is very good, but his Sonic not so much. I'm not a big fan of it. I feel as if he did better as the series went on, and I sent you a clip of Sonic Riders, which I know is one we haven't really talked about, but Sonic Riders of course being the spin-off like racing game, wasn't good, I'm going to be honest, and I really did not appreciate his line delivery in that, and I don't know if that's a direction choice, that's him being nervous about the role, I don't know, like I don't know for a fact, but long story short, I just didn't think he was that great in these early stuff. This doesn't apply to him particularly. You know, there's other voice actors like Mike Pollock who voices Eggman. He does a fantastic job, but in this game, he's just very flat. Did you pick up that?
Yeah, like the voice acting, I definitely think took a bit of a dive from some of the things before. Like I found Knuckles like weird. I didn't hear much of Knuckles in the story, but I did not like his voice actor. I don't know. It just, I think it's because this is where they started making Knuckles more of like a joke character, is it not now? He's more kind of the bumbling big guy rather than the kind of more tougher, kind of stoic badass he was before. So I don't know. Maybe it take a bit of getting used to that, but I wasn't particularly a fan of that. Yeah, again, I think Shadow sounded okay to me, but yeah, like a lot of the ones just, yeah, there was something about it, as you say. Like I don't quite know if I can put my finger on it, but it just didn't sound right.
It's very like it's taken very seriously seriously. And again, Sonic the Hedgehog game, but it just seems very overly serious. As I said, this is the first game where we see Sonic the Hedgehog dying, and it's like, really? You're killing off your mascot? Okay, fair enough. You've got a demon who is literally called Mephiles. I'm not even joking here, by the way. There's like a shadow creature that takes Shadow and transforms into a shadow version of Shadow.
It has no mouth as well. Nobody
Yeah.
comments on that. So I was like, he has no mouth. How are you not commenting on this, first of all?
I actually don't know if that's like a programming thing or it's a design choice.
Good point, actually. Fair point. Fair play.
I have been wondering this for years. If anybody knows the answers, please reach out to me, because I'm very curious to know if he was supposed to have like a toothy grin or something like that. But no, he has nothing, because obviously with his what do you call it? His crystal form, it's just weird. And of course, Silver is like this naive kid, and I like Silver. Okay, I love the idea that they were trying to go for. I feel sorry that this was the first game he was introduced in, but my god, his storyline's just awful. Or not awful, but it feels as if they were trying to do the Sonic Adventure thing, where they were trying to link all three stories together. And I appreciate they were trying to go for an adventure style game, but again, you don't have to listen to us to tell you what problems there were. The hub worlds are too big. In Sonic Adventure, did you feel as if the hub worlds were too big in that game?
No, I think they're of a good size, and what's good as well is you kind of get to know the layout of them quite well. The more you play it kind of becomes easier to navigate around. I think if I was going to say, if you're making a hub world for a Sonic game, don't base it off Venice. Don't base it off narrow bridges where there's water that there's no that you can run straight into because the game because it's too fast and you can't stop Sonic. There's plenty of other cities to base your game off. Just don't do Venice. Don't do that.
And I mean, of course, there's a whole list of things we could go into. How the models T-pose randomly when they get hit, how characters who are accompanying you in said hub world die randomly.
I forgot about that. The lip syncing is they clearly didn't dub it over, didn't link it up with the English voiceover.
Of course, the romance plot as well, which just seems bizarre. It seems really, really there's actually a kind of side or a mission you have to play to get ahead in the game, where it's you have to choose between Elise or Amy, and you choose and nothing happens. Much like the rest of the game, nothing happens. For Sonic's story, it can be summarised as Elise gets kidnapped 4 times, travels back in time to save her, beats Eggman. That's it. For Shadows is actually a lot more complex. And again, I feel as if they were kind of moving in the right direction with Shadow in this game, but it's almost Shakespearean at times, and I don't mean that as a compliment. Basically, he goes to the future and Mephiles tells him, oh, you were blamed for, I can't even remember, blamed for causing the end of the world somehow. And I don't know. And he's like... He's actually putting a capsule in a Jesus pose. I don't know if it's a Jesus pose or a T pose, one and the same, but at the same time you're just like, what? And I actually didn't realise because there's so much shit covering his face. And you're like, oh, that's supposed to be a present. Oh, it's his kind of journey of saying, I'll let the world think what they think. His friends, Team Dark are back again. You've got E123 Omega, who, although I really like E123 Omega, he's basically an Eggman robot that is kind of jaded that he's been relegated and not used, so he just hates all Eggman's robots, and he just starts destroying all of them. And in the comics, he's fantastic.
I love that story.
He's absolutely fantastic. But in this one, they change his voice, and it just sounds like someone being like, I will be a robot. And you're like, oh no. Oh no. What did you do to Omega? Because in the... Look how they massacred my boy. It's just... so weird. And of course you got Rouge being Rouge, same thing. With Silver's story, he goes through the entire story. This is me going back to you remember the thing I said about Shadow and how he was bringing up the implications of suicide and things like that?
Yeah.
In this one we have Silver the Hedgehog contemplating whether it's morally right to take a life in order to do some good. And I'm like, this is Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm all for serious themes, okay? I feel feel as if a good children's story should have themes that challenge and, you know, like not treat children like children, if that makes sense. But this isn't the way to go. You can't have someone try to kill Sonic the Hedgehog and be like, is it morally right? You know, it's like playing Super Mario Sunshine and it's like he starts talking about tax blockades and things like that. It's like, is it right to blockade a country? It's like, Mario!
Water is a precious resource. There will be wars in the future over it. It's just say if you were to summarize all the philosophical musings in the Sonic games, do you think you could say in the end, it's no use?
Yes. Yes, I could. Oh, it is bizarre. And of course, we've got the final story, which I'll touch on quickly, but did you get round to watching?
I did watch all the cutscenes for the final story.
I mean, other than being awful in itself, I was howling when I saw a video on this, by the way, of someone critiquing the game as a whole, and it's like, okay, fair enough. But there was a bit where you know, when Sonic's dead.
Yeah.
First of all, like I'm going to point out the whole Elise crying thing to release the demon, utter shite. Okay, you know, but we all know it. I don't have to sit here and tell you that just makes no sense. But there's a scene where she's like sitting over Sonic, and then she's like, "Hold on, I feel his presence in the wind. He's not fully dead." So they have to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds to bring him back to life. And what I found hilarious was one person pointed out and said, "Boy, Gerald Robotnik sure missed the boat on that one, didn't he?" And it's like, yeah, imagine if Gerald Robotnik could have revived Maria. I mean, yeah.
It's amazing.
Oh
my God.
That's kind of a slap in the face. I feel like Shadow was seething the entire time, like, oh my god, I could have saved Maria. It's got the Necronomicon out with the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Like,
Oh my
what?
God, don't give them ideas.
Oh, they probably would. I wouldn't be surprised. They gave Shadow a gun. How much more can they hurt the franchise? So I've got to ask before we move on to like the final game of this, but what did you think of the infamous scene in this game?
I feel it's so difficult to talk about this scene because I feel it's been raked over the coals so much, and it's been dissected and analysed and ridiculed. It was a bad idea. It was a bad idea. There's no denying. But I don't know. I mean, this is kind of it's kind of that Snow White thing, isn't it? You know, where like the kiss to revive life. So it's kind of playing on that trend. So it's not like this is a very well worn trope, you know, of fairy tales and fantasy. It's just that, you know, and I think in and of itself it's okay. I think it's just the fact that they've tried to build a relationship between the sentient hedgehog and this princess, this human princess. I don't know what to say. Again, I feel it's one of these scenes that's come to define the whole game, and it's the thing that you're pointing and be like, this is why the game is terrible. And it's not, the game isn't terrible because of that. The game isn't, I don't think the game is terrible. The game's bad because because it wasn't finished. is because it was rushed. That's why the game isn't good, you know. And I just feel that scene is kind of the one that you point to. But look, see, this is why Sonic was always bad. And it's like, no, this is just a misstep. This is like a single misstep that has been kind of blown out of proportion. So I don't really know. Like I just think its legacy is too much now. I think it's probably time to just kind of let it go and be like, you know what, it happened. But at the end of the day, don't all franchises have like a misstep somewhere? Find me a franchise that doesn't have a very bad kind of tonal or whatever story misstep.
What about Duke? Oh no.
That whole thing is a misstep.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yes, but my prodding aside, I totally see what you mean. It is that kind of... It's weird because it skirts the line between cliches, as you said, with the kiss to bring him back and the kind of like generic love story and like this crazy idea of him being, I don't even know, you know, dead but not dead. One of the things, and this is what makes me sad, because as many long-term listeners of the podcast will know, the reason I bought a PlayStation 3 was because I really wanted to play Sonic 06. I remember on the dial-up internet, like, looking up videos that loaded really slowly, and it was literally just Sonic standing in Kingdom Valley. And I kid you not, I was super excited about a lot of these videos. I was seeing like him running, fighting the robots. I was thinking, oh, it looks so good because, as I said, I wasn't a big fan of Heroes or Shadow because of like the cartoony style and just it was a bit too much for me. So I thought this is going to be Sonic's return to form. This is going to be the kind of spiritual successor to Sonic Adventure 3. This is going to be known as Sonic Adventure 3. It wasn't. They tried. It really, really wasn't. And that is a shame. And I just feel I feel sad for it in a way. I feel annoyed in a way that Sega really mismanaged Sonic. But I also feel kind of sad that this is the legacy that Sonic now has. And I'm going to touch on your point. Before we go into the final game, I am going to touch on your point where you said about people who unfairly criticise this game. Because let's face it, Sonic nowadays is just a walking meme.
Yeah, sadly.
Whenever people, as you said, whenever people look at Sonic, they'll always point to this game and go, oh, look, terrible game. And again, not to name names or, spread hate or anything, but there are particular, like, Let's Players out there who they'll be playing earlier games in the franchise and they'll be like, look, a face through a wall, therefore this game is as bad as Sonic 06. And it's like, well, you're playing a game that is, a good couple of years older than Sonic 06 on infinitely older hardware, and you're playing the buggy port of the game, so therefore, what do you expect, kind of thing. But because of that, something else I want to point out, even Sega's response to this. So if you look at the Sonic the Hedgehog social medias like Facebook, Twitter, and so on, they have a lot of self-deprecating humour. And don't get me wrong, some of the memes are top class. You think, wow, I love it. But then you see some of their other ones where they talk about, 06, they talk about Shadow the Hedgehog and things, and I feel as if that's a bad representation. It's almost like if you had a friend, right? You've got a friend who, has been through a couple of missteps of his own, and you always joke to people who don't know said friend. You emphasise his missteps. You don't emphasise, like, the times he was a good friend, the times he did well, his kind of golden age, as it were, before he kind of slipped into this negative period of life. And then as soon as someone's going to meet this new friend, they're not going to think, wow, this guy used to be cool. They're going to think, oh, he was always a loser. And that's what Sonic the Hedgehog feels like up until this point. It feels as if people don't see him as like a credible character anymore. They just see him as a walking punchline. And again, it's Sonic the Hedgehog. We shouldn't get riled up about it and be like, grab your torches and pitchforks. It's something you said as well, that it just seems unfair that a lot of other franchises, like, let's face it, I bash Call of Duty every episode. We've bashed Halo as well. We've bashed so many other games. But why is it that Sonic the Hedgehog gets so much hate in comparison? And I feel as if that is like one of the central reasons behind that, is this kind of like cultivated reputation. And again, as I said, you're allowed to obviously critique Sonic, you're allowed to say this game's bad, I don't like it, fair enough, but what makes Sonic different compared to other franchises?
It's completely true, and that's why I find it so sad but also so fascinating, is, as you say, I cannot think of another example of a franchise that, has had a bad entry and people have retroactively gone back, or people have said, well, this is no good, and then have also retroactively said, wait, but this has never been good. If anything, what tends to happen is if there's a bad game in a franchise, take Call of Duty and stuff, so, maybe you could say for like the last near decade, the quality of games has probably gone down, you'd say, but that's not led people to go back and be like, oh, this was always a terrible franchise. It's made people look back at things like Call of Duty 4 and World at War, and Black Ops, and be like, oh, they were so good, look how the franchise is now, but those were so good. Same with Halo, a lot of people don't like 343's tenure, but, that hasn't like retroactively made people look at the Bungie years and go, oh, what a terrible franchise this always was. It's just elevated Bungie's tenure of Halo. It's just fascinating that what's happened is the reverse with Sonic, in that it's just this run of like a few bad games has just come to define the whole series as terrible, and you're just like, well, why? That's why I say it's just not true. I find it weird and bizarre and just sad that it's happened.
And of course, in between all of these games, you've got the kind of spin-off games. You had the Storybook series, which I don't know if you know much about those.
Is that Secret Rings? And
yep, that's the one. Secret Rings and Black Knight, which I've played them. Again, not my favourite, but the one thing I will say is I admire the creativity.
Yeah.
Sonic and the Secret Rings, they they put him into the Arabian Nights tales, and in Black Knight they put him into like a King Arthur Camelot kind of setting. It's creative. It's completely different compared to the other games, but it's still that Sega, that they're trying new things, they're trying different things. And I mean, obviously, but we've just spent the last hour or so saying like, oh, it didn't work, but you can at least admire them for trying. And whether or not it did work, it's still that idea that they're trying new things and everything. And I feel as if, to kind of cap it off, we really have to talk about Sonic Unleashed, because I was a bit hesitant about including Sonic Unleashed, but I feel as if this is kind of the borderline game between the modern era and the Dark Age. So, of course, being the thorough historian you are, you did play this game. So, how did you find it?
I did. This game you can now get on modern consoles. It came out originally for things like the PS3 and the 360, but you can get it on modern versions now of like those systems. And the story of Unleashed is that while trying to stop Eggman's latest plot, Sonic is basically captured by Eggman, and the Chaos Emeralds are stolen by Eggman, and he uses their power to unleash this kind of ancient evil that's has been residing in the heart of the planet, which then basically splits the planet apart into kind of floating kind of land masses, and this drains the Chaos Emeralds of their power, but also has the effect of transforming Sonic into a kind of different creature called a werehog, basically like a werewolf. And so basically what happens is during the day it's just regular Sonic, but when night falls he turns into the werehog. And so that's what the game is basically, again, trying to repair the damage that Eggman has done to the planet by restoring power to the Chaos Emeralds and fixing the planet and defeating the evil that he has awakened. And so during the day sections you have your kind of classic Sonic speed levels that we're all used to by now, but then during the night you have werehog stages, which are far slower paced and far more focused on combat and kind of more slower, kind of not Mario style, but more that kind of style of platforming. So this was the first game, because it was easiest to get, this was the first game that I played before I tried Shadow or before I tried 06. And what I can say is, so the game starts with two kind of day sections for Sonic, which were the most fun I think I've had playing a Sonic game. They were an absolute blast. Like, it felt, you felt that sense of speed, like the spectacle was great, the controls were perfect, I had no problems at all with any kind of I had no mechanical issues, and it was just such a thrill ride to kind of speed through these kind of village and forest sections, and I was like, it was just like so impressed. I was like, this is so much fun. Unfortunately, then I got to the first werehog section, and the action slows down, and it becomes a grind. And it kind of, I was funny, just thinking back, something you said earlier about the length of Sonic levels. I felt like some of the werehog stages went on for so long, and it was just such a bore and such a drag to go through. I think I maybe played about a quarter of this game, maybe a bit less than a quarter. I kind of gave up when I started to have some trouble with the Sonic day stages, which I've been enjoying before, but there's one in a kind of ice level that I found quite frustrating. Looking back at it, like, I don't think it's so much mechanical, I think it's more kind of my skill level was getting quite tested there. So I can't really blame the game. I don't think it was doing anything wrong. I think it was just me. I was being kind of slow to catch up to the kind of the rise in skill needed for the game. So I think if I put more time into it, I'd probably be fine. As well, the game has a system where you need to collect a certain number of medals in each level to unlock new stages and everything. And the thought of having to go back and play some of the werehog stages, I thought, I can't do it. And it got to a point where I wasn't really looking forward to anything in the game. So for me, there's a great core to this game, and it really shows that they'd kind of learned, and I think they'd really they were mastering by this point how to make a really great 3D Sonic game. They kind of learned from some of the missteps before, and kind of in a way maybe harkened a bit back to some of the adventure games and the things they did right, but they unfortunately felt the need it feels like they didn't feel that was enough for the game to stand by, so they needed to add something else, which was these werehog sections, which just don't work. It plays like a kind of bad God of War clone, and I didn't find them fun, I didn't find them engaging, and so again frustrating, because you're like, oh, you had such a good, there's some great elements to this, but it's just being weighed down by this kind of tedious side to it. So again, it's disappointing but you kind of feel maybe a bit more hopeful about the series looking at it, because you feel like they're on the right direction.
Going off of 06, it took me like a long time to get back into the series, and everyone was saying how amazing Sonic Unleashed was. It was a return to form and everything. So eventually I caved in, I bought the game, and I'm going to be honest, I just did not like this game. This seems to be, a very lukewarm take, but I do agree the speed stages are fantastically done. I think this was the first game time they introduced the boost formula, at least for the main series games. I don't know if it was like in Sonic Rush or anything like that, but especially for these games, that was the first time there was the boost formula, and like the opening is absolutely fantastic. But I think up until the Werehog comes in, I feel as if that's just where it goes down completely. It just spirals into what the hell were you thinking? And as I was saying before, you brought up the length of the Werehog levels are just terrible. They repeat the same jazz music as you're beating up the enemies. I hate it. I hate that. I hate it so much. I think the Werehog is terrible. I think even the characters just seem so bland. They took what was like kind of Sky Chase and Adventure 1 wasn't like a high-hitting great performance, but I would take a million Sky Chases over whatever the hell they put into Sonic Unleashed.
Oh,
The like quick time event.
yeah.
The one thing I will say is aesthetically, this game looks gorgeous. I love the levels based in like Spain and, the ice level, as you said. There's levels based in China. There's just so many beautiful locations. It's just such a grind trying to get to them because you need to replay levels and get tokens to play through certain levels. So, it's like you have to get the day and night counters to kind of progress, and that killed my enjoyment because maybe it's just me being lazy, but if I want to play a Sonic game, I just want to keep going from level to level to keep on running. I don't want to stop and be like, all right, I've got to take 5 photos of Professor Pickles. I don't want to do that. I just want to play the games, and there's some great levels in this, even so much that they included them in Sonic Generations. I don't want to play it. I just want to play the game. Let me play the game, Sega. This is like some people's favourite game, so again, I'm not saying just because I didn't like it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to like it. This is one of the only Sonic games that I actually haven't completed. Did you know that?
I don't blame you, because as I said, when I figured out that you had to get like the tokens, I was just like, that really killed that really killed any enthusiasm. It's okay sometimes to repeat levels, and like I know Sonic games have that as a kind of staple of repeating levels, but there's something about having to replay it as the exact same character, especially when it's something like the Werehog levels. It completely sapped my enthusiasm, so I don't blame you for not wanting to stick with this one.
But I mean, I think I got to the last fight and I just gave up. I was like, I kept getting beat. And unlike the BioWizard in Adventure 2, and I know I'm biased for saying, oh, in Adventure 2, but for the BioWizard, I genuinely struggled. It took me years to actually go back to it and be like, okay, I'm going to try and defeat it. And there was that kind of swelling sense of accomplishment, and I was like, I can't believe I finally completed this. Whereas if I go back to Sonic Unleashed, I'm not going to feel that. I'm just going to think, all right, it's just another game ticked off. That's the thing as well, like going back, as you said, and playing through the game as these characters, it's like you're boosting through a level, you're zooming past. But see if you have to stop every 5 minutes and just kind of look around for the tokens, and you're like, oh no, I ran by a token, I have to run back. And it's like, now you're just killing the pacing. And I feel as if they were onto something good here, but see, at the same time, I feel as if this was kind of, I wouldn't say the beginning of the end, but I feel as if this is when Sonic became a lot more formulaic, where they just stopped trying to innovate, trying to do something different. Because see, at the end of the day, whatever you think of, Heroes or Shadow or 06, they were all so distinctive. They had their own storylines, they had their own images. Because if you look at an image from Sonic 06, you immediately go, that's Sonic 06. If you go from Shadow, you go, oh, that's Shadow, oh, that's Heroes. But yeah, later on they kind of abused the boost formula a little too much, I would say. That's something we will discuss in the next episode. But before we finish up, is there anything you want to say?
I think this is a fascinating era for Sonic, and unfortunately a lot of that is negative kind of fascination, because this clearly did a lot of damage to the franchise, and I think unjustly did a lot of damage to the franchise. And I totally agree with what you just said there about Sega innovating, and they really did try to innovate in this era, and I think a lot of it didn't work, but some stuff did, and you can admire that, and I think as well they were trying for kind of grand stories and everything, which I don't think always paid off, but again, they really were trying to kind of lean into that cinematic side of gaming, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. frustrating all the time. Again, I didn't have as much fun playing a lot of these games as I did with the kind of 2D ones. You know, not to say that I had some frustration with the 2D ones as well, but I didn't find a game here that I latched onto like I did with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, you know, where I really wanted to play more of it. I kind of reached a point with all these games where I was just like, I'm done. I've had enough. I've had my fill. And it is frustrating, and there's a lot of frustration to be had. You do feel there was a lot of rushed development and everything that just harmed the franchise, and it's frustrating in that level to see, you know, the creators do damage to the series. But I do think the negative aspects of this run of games have just completely gone out of proportion. And I think it's really undeserved, the damage that it's done to the franchise, you know, and to label the whole franchise as bad because of a couple games is nonsense, and it is stupid, to be honest, in my opinion. It's sad what happened in this period, but there still is good. There still is good, and even in some of the bad games, I think there still is good. And yeah, just stop hating, stop using this, like, stop painting the whole series with a brush because of a couple of games. You know, it is what it is. They weren't great games, but as I say, find me a franchise that has a perfect record, because you won't be able to find one, because every franchise that runs for as long as Sonic is going to have some duds, and we just need to deal with it. And that doesn't have to reflect on the whole series.
No, couldn't have said it better myself. It feels as if Sonic, at the time when, you know, he was competing against Mario, he was built up to be like, you know, that concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah.
Of, like, you know, building up this character for great things, and then it was just like one dud after the other. And, you know, I've, like, throughout this episode, I have expressed my dislike for Sonic Heroes, for bits of Shadow, bits of Sonic 06. The one thing I want to emphasise here, if you've listened this far, I want to point out, if any of these are your favourite games, do not let anybody take that away from you, because it's bad enough people make fun of the things, you know, that you like, or, you know, you get attached to, and then people are like, haha, it's smelly. The thing is, at the end of the day, Sonic deserves to be critiqued, but I totally side with you, Adam. I don't think that it deserves the amount of, like, hate it gets. And I feel as if, because of, you know, internet celebrities and, you know, now gaming companies, because Sega's on board with it, and that's almost their identity, where it's just self-deprecating humour. It's them saying, haha, remember how bad we were in that game? And it's like, but that wasn't Sonic. Sonic was this cool dude with the attitude. Maybe it was a product of the 90s. I can totally accept that. But there's so many people who grew up with Sonic who, you know, Sonic has such, like, a dedicated fan base to it. And it's kind of, like, continued throughout the years. It will probably continue for many more. Maybe not in the same way that it used to be. Because you still get diehard fans who say, oh, Shadow the Hedgehog's the best, or Sonic Heroes is the best because that was their first games. And I'm guilty of that as well, because the Sonic Adventure ones were some of my first games, and I still love those games in comparison to Unleashed or any of the other ones. But the main takeaway I want to emphasise is, if you like these games, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to feel ashamed that, oh, you like Sonic and the Secret Rings, or, oh, I like Shadow the Hedgehog. I might not understand it. I genuinely might not understand it, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Again, it's just to reiterate your point, it is way overblown. Whether you love or hate this age, one thing I will say is this: the fact that they tried something different, it didn't work. But see, at the same time, what other franchise can you think of that have done something very similar, had, like, game after game that wasn't a hit, and then it's being talked about to this day? Because I can't think of many. Maybe COD, maybe I can't even think, you know, maybe there's a couple of examples out there, but honestly,
it feels like with COD, you could argue COD got bad because it's maybe treaded water more than anything, rather than they've never really, I don't think they've really been like they've taken a swing and a miss. It's always been kind of, they've played it safe, you know. Well, at least here with Sonic, Sega were trying things. Maybe they were missing a lot of the shots, but, you know, they were trying to take them at least.
I mean, Sega is infamous for missing the mark. Just look at their treatment of the Alien Colonial Marine saga. That is a fascinating read, by the way. It is fascinating to see what happened there, and it does seem as if it's partly due to mismanagement, but I think at the end of the day, I don't know, I feel as if, at least in this era, Sonic had a lot more character compared to what was to come. And on that note, the next episode we're going to do is, we're going to focus on the modern era of Sonic. So we're going to be talking about Sonic Colors all the way through to Forces and Frontiers. years. You know, we've got a lot of games to kind of get prepared for. Adam, I am so curious to hear what you have to say about these games coming up.
I'm looking forward to taking the next step, and it'll be nice to kind of join all the dots now. You know, having gone from the beginning to get to the end. So I'm excited. I'm excited to do this.
And honestly, it's going to be one hell of a journey, because once we finish this episode and really once we've finished all the ages of Sonic, we are going to be focusing on a trivia quiz, which I can't wait to do with you. And then we are going to be capping off with a retrospective of the Sonic Adventure series. So that is one to look out for. So do not miss that. Adam, thank you. That's all I have to say. I'm just like, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. It was as much as there was frustration. I'm still glad I did it. So you're more than welcome.
You can tick that off the gaming bucket list, as it were.
Another piece of the puzzle filled in.
Exactly. As always, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. If you would like to hear more episodes where we talk about Sonic, or really just anything to do with gaming or films, anime, general interest, you know, we've got a whole catalogue ready for you. You can catch us on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube as well, and really any good podcast app. So just look for the name Satsunami and we will see you there. But until then, thank you all so much for listening. Stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated.